Well, let's begin. Welcome to the Research Forum. My name is David Sancho. I am David Sancho. I am lecturer here at this department. And my research area is related with public policy and public management innovation. And for this reason, I have the honor to present to you Juan Carlos Triviño. Juan Carlos Triviño, as you know, is assistant professor here at our department, and he's Juan de la Cierva Incorporation Research Fellow, and he was postdoctoral research fellow at eBay here. He focuses, his research area is focused with multi-level regulatory policy and governance, and he studied the dynamics of coordination and implementation of public policies in urban areas and cities. And his focus of the actual research is related with immigrants and the response of the cities to with public policy to the problems and to the situations of this kind of immigrants in Spain, in Europe, and in Latin America. Today, he will present to us this research, when transboundary crises hit, the role of a Spanish municipality in protecting precarious migrants, that his study responds to one research questions. How the cities are responding to precarious immigrants' problems. His research focus is related with multi-level governance. That is a traditional form to study this kind of public policies. Well, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, David, for the very kind introduction.
David, please.
David, thank you so much, David, for a very kind introduction and for introducing my work. And thank you all for being here today. I'm at home, so I feel very happy to see, colleagues and friends here. I would like also to take the opportunity to thank Veronica Benet Martinez for inviting me to be here today, and to the department for organizing this event. So the title of my presentation, When Transboundary Crises Hit, the Role of Spanish Municipalities in Protecting Precarious Migrants, is derived from a project that I'm currently undertaking, a national project that I'm currently undertaking that is called Migra. Actually, I have Juliana Fornacier here, who is a PhD candidate in the department and is working in the project. Also Eva Fortes, who is also a PhD candidate in the department, that also have greatly contributed to the success of the process, right? So a small disclaimer before I start: I'm not presenting like final results. I'm presenting very, very raw preliminary results, very descriptive ones. So don't expect like a big wow. No, it's just to lower the expectations a little bit. I will focus mainly on the conceptual part of what of the role of municipalities when transboundary crises hit, and how they can protect or not precarious migrants. Because the not question is the not issue is also present here, right? It's a political decision. Okay, so let's start. So we live, as we have seen in the last years, in a constant state of apparent crisis. We see crises derived from interstate conflict. We see the Russian-Ukrainian war and the implications that they have had not only for that region but also for Europe and the world economy. We also are seeing climate-induced disasters around the world. All over the place. This is something that is becoming more and more part of the conversation. We're also seeing crises derived from mobility, from human mobility. And these crises are mainly located on the reception side, how to receive X amount of migrants or forced migrants from different parts of the world. And of course, I mean, a big, huge mega crisis that we had in the last years, the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, we are very clear of the individual and also group implications that this pandemic had on each one of us, right? So, I mean, when we see this panorama, and I hate to be pessimistic, but I'm sorry, I mean, this is what our world is looking like today. That makes us wonder.
¿Qué es esto? Ah, la presentación. Para, ya está. Estrés, por Dios.
Please, you can move the microphones. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
vale, ya está, perdona.
So when we see all these elements, these issues, we wonder whether crises are the new normal. And of course, I mean, we see some scholars that I cite in this paper who are defining our current times under this crisis as the new normal, this type of normalcy where, I mean, crises are everywhere, they overlap. I mean, we are talking about poly-crisis, we're talking about compound crisis, among many other things. So from here, the big question that emerged is, are we prepared to live under the new normal? Are we ready as societies to actually live under these situations of crisis? Yes, I'm sorry, the microphone is still on. Could you please mute?
Perhaps we can do it directly.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Okay. So, so under these circumstances, I mean, we wonder if I mean, we are prepared to live under. Oh, now I'm silenced.
Excuse me.
This is a mini crisis. Okay, so, I mean, when we wonder about this issue about, I mean, us prepared as societies to live under this new normal, I mean, the question is that we still don't know. We are still in the process. We are still acquiring this kind of capacities to be prepared, right? More importantly, is to move the mouse, let me see, okay. More importantly is to ask ourselves, to whom do we go in times of crisis? And we as citizens, for us, I mean, the mental image that we have every time that we have a crisis is to go to our national governments. I mean, it's to expect national governments to act and to do something, right? But we know that, I mean, reality is much more complex than that. We know that, I mean, there is a plethora of actors at the global, at the regional, at the national, at the local levels, private, public, state, non-state actors that intervene in this process, and they are moved by interest, they are moved by many factors, right? So in this context, when we see this diffuse power located among interdependent actors, the next question is, who has the legitimacy to act? Who has the capacity and the legitimacy to act? Is it private actors, public actors, the state, the national state? Who has the legitimacy and, more importantly, the legitimacy to act on what? On what part of the story should they act? So, for instance, I give you an example. I studied food safety crisis when, I mean, food was, I mean, contaminated food, I mean, across Europe, I mean, people dying, as it happened in 2011 with the so-called cucumber crisis. So here the main question was to ask, I mean, where the pathogen that was contaminating the food was coming from. That was the crisis about, right? Other crises are more about managing the implications on critical infrastructures, like a cyber attack. So this is, I mean, the question of who has the legitimacy to act and where to act are relevant issues. Now I would like to move to, I mean, this idea of these diffuse actors, right, that may intervene in times of crisis. And I would like to lay the focus on municipalities in times of crisis. And here the question is whether municipalities have a role in the management of crisis. Can local governments actually intervene in, I mean, when the COVID-19 pandemic came, when you have a reception crisis with thousands of migrants coming into a territory, do they have a role in all of this? And of course, my answer is yes, otherwise I wouldn't be here, right? But in this context, I ask even, a deeper question, which is like in this context where municipalities do have a role in managing crisis, what happens when they have to protect vulnerable groups? We're talking here about migrants, but let's talk about, I don't know, people with disabilities, the urban poor, among many other groups who are who are very vulnerable to the negative implications of crisis, right? So in this context, I'm very much interested on precarious migrants, but who are them? Who are precarious migrants? So precarious migrants are a category intersecting legal, administrative status, and socioeconomic realities. So to put it in simple terms, the most clear image that we may have of a precarious migrant is an undocumented migrant, right? But there is more to the story. It's not only documented migrants. We are talking about, for instance, people who are temporary agricultural workers working on a short-term permit. We are talking about rejected asylum seekers. We are talking about people who are waiting for their asylum application to go through, and in the meantime, they live in this limbo, right? So we are talking about these groups who are under this quite, legal administrative limbo. But this legal administrative limbo, of course, intersects with socio-economic realities. The fact that you are a woman, the fact that you work for the service sector, that you don't have a proper contract, that you are working in the underground economy. So all these issues that add layers of complexity to your own situation. So in this context, how cities can respond to protecting these people or this group of people when crisis hit. So now I move to the concrete presentation that I have for you today. And basically, the starting point of the project, of the overall project, is to explore how municipalities respond to vulnerable groups, in this case, precarious migrants, in the presence of transboundary crisis. And we are laying the focus, as I said before, on the COVID-19 pandemic. In this presentation, though, I will be talking a lot about to what extent Spanish municipalities develop crisis response processes aimed at precarious migrants during the COVID-19 pandemic, and why so. I will focus mainly on the first part of the question, on the part on the to what extent. The why, this is something that we need to develop further in the future. Okay. So I've been talking a lot about crisis, about transboundary crisis is on the title, but what is exactly a transboundary crisis? So a transboundary crisis, this is a concept that comes from public administration scholars. Actually, one of the most seminal works on the subject was developed by Ansel et al. In 2010, and they speak about those threats that require urgent actions and cross multiple geographical, functional, and temporal boundaries. Geographical boundaries is very clear. We live in a globalized, interdependent world. Crises are not localized. They travel, right? So, they cross geographies. Functional boundaries, as we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic, a public health crisis had negative implications on the economy, on social emergency, on many different aspects, right? And temporal boundaries is that we know when a crisis starts. Some crises are very limited in time, but others, remain ongoing. And again, the COVID-19 is a perfect example. It started in February 2020. However, we saw the implications of direct implications of the crisis until 2022. So an important component in this definition of transboundary crisis is that crises are politically built. And I emphasize this element because the sense of urgency that may emerge in this process is something that is driven by political leadership that are seeing like, okay, we have to do something, we have to act. The public is nervous, is concerned, is worried, and we need to expand this concern, so we act as interdependent actors. Within this literature or this conceptualization, these scholars, they speak a lot about crisis management, so how to manage a crisis. And basically, the main tenets of crisis management are answering three questions: what to do, with whom, and how. what to do. What are we supposed to do as policymakers when a crisis hit? With whom we cooperate in this process, how we coordinate responses, and how exactly what do we do in this process. In this context, this conceptualization has developed a series of crisis management tasks, and they are quite gradual, or they move in a gradual manner. So we start. There are like 7 tasks that they identify, from detection of the crisis, moving to sense making, making sense of what the crisis is, then decision making, coordination, meaning making, evaluation, and I forgot the 7th one. But this is, in overall terms, what these 7 tasks are. What should these tasks produce? Of course, they should produce unexpected results. Expected results, me as a policymaker, I'm doing all this because I have something in mind. I want to detect where the crisis is coming from when it's a food crisis, or I want to provide housing to the population that was severely hit by floods in a given territory, right? So this is, the expected results. There is always this idea of how effective the response is, depending on achieving or not these expected results. So all these, I had the chance, the opportunity, or the privilege to work on this topic on a European project. Actually, that was just after I finished my PhD. That was my first job as postdoctoral researcher, the Transcrisis project, which basically aimed to understand, the crisis management capacities that the European Union had. Right, and this was before the COVID-19, so we were thinking about, the financial crisis, we were thinking about food crisis, we were thinking about Ebola, all these issues, right? So basically how Europe responded, and this is where all this framework is coming from. So now I move to the contribution that we're aiming to make with our research question and this conceptual framework. First of all, as you could have guessed, the Munmigra project is at the intersection of the transboundary crisis management literature and the local migration governance literature, right? So the first literature I already explained. I had the opportunity, or have had the opportunity, to contribute to this literature. Actually, I recently published a paper where we look at the responses of regional institutions in South America in the context of the Venezuelan migration, right? The migration of 5 million Venezuelans that have arrived in the region. So how regional institutions have coordinated responses to receive this group of people. And the second literature is the local migration, local governance literature that I have also contributed. Actually, my dissertation contributes to this literature, and it's basically focused on highlighting the role that local governments, municipalities, cities have in the reception and integration of migrants and forced migrants. So it's, trying to put the emphasis on this, space. From here, we aim to make a threefold contribution, right? The first contribution, and this goes especially to the transboundary crisis management literature, is to move beyond this classical state-centric focus, right? We are asking to put the lenses, or to put the lenses on other actors, or actors beyond the nation state. The second contribution that we aim to make is to place municipal responses to crisis under a governance approach. So actually, here is this idea that actually, municipalities, they have a role in responding to crisis, right? And within this idea that municipalities have a role in crisis, a central actor to us is local governments. Local governments may act as nodal points that may coordinate responses that are delimited to the territory or the jurisdiction where they are located. But of course, they need coordination with other actors at different levels. And finally, for migration scholars, we talk a lot about, crisis, and why we shouldn't talk about migration crisis, why it's better to say a humanitarian crisis, reception crisis, a political reception crisis, etc. However, we have not delved enough into the effects of crisis on governance dynamics, trying to systematize, what crisis entail and what crisis or how crisis can be managed from a political and a policy perspective. So this is pretty much the contribution that we are aiming to make. So now I move to a central part of my research question. If you recall what I mentioned before, I'm very much interested on how Spanish municipalities constructed local crisis response processes aimed to protecting precarious migrants. And here we argue that this is a process based on two essential, crucial crisis management tasks: decision-making and coordination. Decision-making, what to do; coordination, how to implement or with whom implement, what we have decided, right? And the second element of a local crisis response process is to look at these localized capacities at the municipal level that allow municipalities to solve the direct or indirect implications of the crisis by addressing this decision-making and coordination, right? So from here, our theoretical expectation is that highly cooperative, innovative, and central municipalities in decision-making and coordination will develop strong crisis response processes. And I will go back to each one of these three elements that I just introduced. So this is basically, the model that we have developed, the theoretical model that we're developing to study local crisis response processes. As you recall, I'm talking about, two steps. First step, that is the local crisis response process itself, which is formed by decision-making and coordination, and the second step, which are the factors that explain, the construction of these processes. So within this first step, which is, this presentation is about, we are looking at, cooperation, managerial innovation, and centrality. So basically what we claim here is that, cooperation, which is understood as promoting relationships with actors on the vertical and horizontal dimensions of governance, will have a positive effect on or will create a process that is quite strong or positive for the response. Managerial innovation is a very simple conceptualization, the one that we use here, and it's basically to do things differently from what they used to be, right? So when you have a crisis, you have to be innovative, you have to create things that are different from business as usual. And the third element is the centrality, right? And it's this idea of being involved in the process. And this is the component where cities or municipalities have a role. How central you are in decision-making and coordination when responding to a crisis. And the second step, as I said before, this is more related to the factors contributing to crisis response processes. Factors can be, the size of the municipal budget, the size of the migrant population, the political leadership, the political color of the local government, among other factors. But as I said, I won't get into this part. So now I move to the more empirical part of my presentation. And I would like to explain why I'm focusing on Spanish municipalities during the COVID-19 pandemic. But I would like to divide this question in two parts. First, the first part on Spanish municipalities, and then on the COVID-19 pandemic. So when it comes to Spanish municipalities, and as we all know, we can say that Spain is a quasi-federal administrative model where we see that in the subnational level it has a very important role, a very strong role in social policy. Actually, we see that design, decisions, and implementation of social policy are occurring at the subnational level. The national level coordinates in different areas. This is more in general terms. And when it comes to the subnational level itself, we can see that in Spain we have around 8,132 municipalities, from which 470 municipalities are over 20,000 inhabitants, and I'm not putting this number randomly. This is, there is a reason why I'm focusing on these 470 municipalities, so I want you to keep this number in mind, or at least the idea of the 20,000 inhabitants. So when it comes to municipalities, we see that, I mean, they have several competences. Sometimes they are shared, I mean, in social policies, shared with, mainly with the regional level, with the autonomous communities. And very importantly, for the context of this paper, they have competences on the evaluation, information, and attention of situations of social need and social exclusion, people living, in homelessness on the streets, people who, don't have where to live. I mean, they need emergency housing. I mean, these kind of issues. I mean, municipalities, they have competences on this, and this is, of course, central if we are talking about precarious migrants during the COVID-19. Also, they have other competences on public housing, on contributing to, public health diagnosis, sports, schooling surveillance, gender, mobility, local police. All this is from the law of that organized the local level from 1985. And very importantly, municipalities in Spain, they have the responsibility to register every single inhabitant who is in their jurisdiction. This is what all of us know as empadronamiento. They are responsible for this, and they are obliged that notwithstanding your legal status or your administrative status, you have to be registered. We know in practice, part of my dissertation was on this, that, this not always happens. Municipalities or local governments, sometimes they have internal memos where they create new requirements that make harder for these groups to actually have empadronamiento. And you know that empadronamiento is essential if you want to register your kids in school, go to the doctor, among other things. So this is a very important element. Now I move to the second part of my question, the COVID-19 pandemic, and why I focus on this. So, as we know, especially at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Spain was one of the most affected countries when we look at the infection rate and the mortality rate. Actually, this map is from March 2020. It was second after Italy when it comes to confirmed cases and also death toll. So, it's very obvious that, Spain, was greatly impacted, at the beginning when we didn't have much information about, where the crisis was coming from, how to manage this crisis, what to do, and with whom, right? From here, we see that, of course, this is not only in Spain. We see that this is prevalent around the world. The majority of COVID-19 cases were concentrated in urban settings, given, the conditions of density in the cities, interactions, all the aspects that made the pandemic, the virus to travel faster, right? And more importantly, Spain was one of the first countries to do like a very strict lockdown. If you recall, people were even, getting dogs to go out. They were actually buying or getting whatever they could say that they could walk the dogs, because it was one of the only activities that were allowed according to the law. And actually, the strict lockdown, yes, it went away around May 2020, but after that, if you recall, 2020, 2021, and up to 2022, we had selective lockdowns. Actually, you remember that we had a curfew after certain time of the night for a very long period of time. So now I would like to mention why precarious migrants in this context. As I explained before, this is a very vulnerable group that is mainly concentrated in urban settings, who work for the service economy. They are working in their underground economy, in the care sector as well, and they were severely hit by the implications of this lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic. They lack information, they lack resources, and we see that cities, actually certain municipalities, they attempted to look after this group of people. I'm writing that all over Spain there are around 500,000 precarious migrants, and I say around is because, this getting these figures is extremely difficult, given that, for instance, when you go to a municipality and you ask them, like, tell me, how many inhabitants are, they registered or they are empadronados with only the passport, let me know. Even with friends who work for municipalities, they tell me, like, I'm sorry, this is confidential information. Given the current political climate, it's understandable why they are not saying this. So this is an approximate. So now I would like to move to what did we do in order to answer this question of to what extent, cities build these local crisis response processes aimed to precarious migrants in the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we did was quite simple, which is, well, not that simple because we are still struggling with the survey. We did a survey that we submitted to policy officials responsible for migration matters in the 417 municipalities of over 20,000 inhabitants. And the reason why we're focusing on these 417 is that depending on the population, according to the law, there are more competences that municipalities have. So over 20,000, you have competences on social emergency, which is very important. So we address these policy officials. However, these policy officials, they were not addressed just by chance. It's not any sort of official. We have to remember as well that in Spanish municipalities, they tend to have units that are responsible for reception integration matters. They have a policy official or several policy officials who are responsible for this area, and they act as hubs of knowledge within their municipalities, coordinating in different areas regarding migrants, forced migrants, or precarious migrants, as this is the case. So, these are highly knowledgeable expert people. They are very specialized, and that's why we are focusing on them. So, the service is still ongoing, and actually, Juliana and Eva, they know very well, the struggle that we are having to increase our response rate. So far, we have been able to obtain 91 responses, which is equivalent to 91 municipalities, which is a 21.5% response rate. We are about to sign an agreement with the Spanish Federation of Provinces and Municipalities. They will help us distribute this survey, which we are very excited because this will be a great push for the responses. So to give you an idea, if we divide in population clusters, we have covered all 6 municipalities of over 500,000 people in Spain. We have covered around 50% of those between 200,000 and 500,000, a third between 100,000 and 200,000, between 25-30% of those between 50,000 inhabitants and 100,000 inhabitants, and those who are less than 50,000 inhabitants, we have less than 20% of the total. Okay, so the questionnaire. This is, we designed a questionnaire using Lime survey. Actually, Juliana is the expert on the survey design, on how the layout looks like. And actually, this questionnaire is divided in 4 parts. First, we ask, respondents about socio-demographic and political information. Of course, we have that information, but we want them to feel like comfortable that, okay, this is not going to be anything weird or tricky, like how many inhabitants, migrants your city has according to, percentage, who was governing in your municipality when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, were you in the municipality when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. This was a very important question as a filter. We also asked them to tell us which actions or policies were implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic addressing this group, precarious migrants. We put all over the place, what precarious migrants are, and we reminded everywhere that we were talking about them. And actually, with these actions, we presented like a repertoire of different actions. They just have to click like yes, yes, no, just, very simple, very descriptive. And then we passed to the assessment of local initiated cooperation and innovation. Did your municipality cooperate with this actor, this other actor? How do you assess this cooperation? Highly cooperative, not that cooperative. And something similar we did with innovation, how innovative you feel or you think your responses were for this group. And also the centrality, how central your municipality was in deciding and coordinating the response. So this is this assessment part. And finally, we asked about the effectiveness of the response, how effective the response response was, according to your assessment. Of course, I won't get in the effectiveness part. So, very preliminary descriptive data, nothing fancy here. So what we find is that the policy areas prioritized by municipalities, by the 91 municipalities surveyed so far, is, almost all of them, they implemented socioeconomic measures, which is understandable. Trying to, provide food, providing clothing, providing even money, financial aid. Some municipalities declared that they had provided this for these precarious migrants. The second highest priority for municipalities was accommodation. This is totally understandable in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, given that, you had people on quarantine that didn't have where to stay, people who simply didn't have a place to stay to spend the night during the curfews. So this was the second most important priority. The third one is information about, vaccination, information about, what to do with, my legal status. The foreigner's office is closed now and I need to renew my residence permit. I'm in this limbo, what should I do? So these kind of things. I'm afraid of going to the doctor. Can I go to the doctor? Will the doctor deport me if I tell him that I'm not feeling well? These kind of things that are quite central in this context. And digitalization also, if they invested in trying to make easier the access to all these services through digital means. The other ones, well, they were not as relevant as this fourth. To the question, how central was your local government in the decision-making and coordination of the responses to precarious migrants, what we find is, to me, was not very surprising. They find that they feel that their municipalities, their local governments were completely central in actually providing, actually intervening in the decisions and intervening in the coordination of the response. They were between very central and completely central. We ask, this same question for other actors, how central it was for you, the national government, autonomous regions, etc. But I won't present this because of time constraints. Then we ask the question on how do you value the cooperation between the local government and the following actors. And what we see here is that in decision making, the respondents, they consider that it was very cooperative or completely cooperative. When they were asked about units within local government, so interdepartmental cooperation, and with civil society, right? We have to also remember, and this is something I've been studying a lot throughout my career, that local governments in Spain, they have a network of civil society actors that they work with. So, this is something that, is it's normal that it may emerge. Of course, depending on the political color of the municipality, this cooperation may be higher or lower, right? But this is the top two actors that we find on decision making. When it comes to a national government and regional governments, the responses are not that high. Actually, on the 5 points scale, most of the responses are on the third level, which is just cooperative, right? When it comes to coordination, a very similar story happens. We find the highest numbers among units within local government and with civil society, not so much when it comes to national government, and a little bit more than national government when it comes to regional government. And finally, when we ask about how innovative do you think your municipality was during the COVID-19 pandemic, to me, these responses were a little bit surprising because, most of the municipalities, they said okay, we were not super innovative, we were just innovative, which I don't know. Certain municipalities, of course, they completely innovative, and I can tell you, because we are among colleagues, Barcelona, for instance, they say we're completely innovative, and to me that makes sense because they have a trajectory of investing a lot on these policies. But most of them, they felt that they were in between. When it comes to coordination, similar story, right? We find that they were not super innovative. They don't consider themselves as innovating too much during the COVID-19 pandemic, but they say, well, there is some degree of innovation. So after presenting this very descriptive data, I would like, well, to conclude by first, well, highlighting the relevance of the research that we are doing. I mean, crises are the new normal. Municipalities must be prepared to, these crisis situations, and they must be prepared to protecting those who might be mostly affected by this crisis. So this is super relevant, the information that we are obtaining here. From the descriptive data, we find that local governments they consider themselves as central actors, which is great because that reinforces, our argument that actually, local governments matter and they see themselves as important actors in these situations of crisis. Something that we find is that there is a very strong horizontal cooperation when we look at the governance dimensions. With civil society and with units within local governments, but not so much vertical cooperation. Vertical cooperation with national governments and regional governments. We also asked about the EU, but the EU was non-existent in the results that we have got so far. And finally, innovation is not as strong as expected. The perception of innovation is not as strong as we expected. It's in between, not too innovative, but not very innovative. Next steps. First of all, of course, finalize data collection. That's very important. We are pushing to increase our response rate. In a very optimistic scenario, I hope to get at least half of the 470 municipalities that we have, and then, of course, analyze the data. We are planning to do a paper on this particular presentation that I'm presenting today. In 3 weeks' time, I will present this, more results in a conference. And then after that, we move to the qualitative part, where we will focus, based on our survey, we will focus on municipalities that rank quite high in our model. And we will choose 3-4 municipalities. We will do this after the summer, and we will do an in-depth study of these municipalities, the process, the effectiveness, the actors, the whole scenario. And I leave you here with, the webpage of our project. Follow us on Twitter or X for more updates. And thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. And now it's time to comments, questions. Have your hands and yes, Antoni.
And then I'll ask a question too.
Yeah, of course.
I think whenever I had the last forum, there were no batteries. I think there's no batteries.
Let's try it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. Super interesting. I just have two comments. The first one, maybe let me take one of the things that you said in the last part of your presentation, when you said that the crises are the new normal, or we have to endure a situation in which essentially we're going to experience crisis pretty much every day, if I may. So I guess why is that, and especially, is it that different from the crisis that we experienced before? Because there have been quite a lot of crises since the beginning of humanity. But if we go back to the beginning of democracy, we've seen quite a lot of them, and many of them related to immigration. So just want you to reflect on why is it that the crisis that you were talking about poses different challenges compared to the ones that we experienced before. That's first of the philosophical question. The second one is related to the empirical part, to the innovative question. I'm not really that surprised that you find some sort of mixed results or something that you were not expected. Essentially because the label innovative or innovation, it's quite hard to define. Even myself, I would struggle to come up with a proper definition. So maybe one of the problems is that either they did not understand it or they understood different things when they read the same label. So as your sample gets bigger, maybe you want to check things like, I don't know, people that have been there for a longer period of time maybe have a different idea of innovation compared to people that just have been there for a couple of years or something. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Carlos,
We can gather some questions. That's fine.
That's my question, and then we'll have Mark, and then Abel. My first question was actually Tony's question, so thank you. Yes. There is a literature about the myth of being in crisis, the myth of we're doing worse than ever. And so there's, that's something interesting to look into, because if you look historically, actually, and there's a lot of political debate about this, we are actually doing much better in terms of health, in terms of life expectancy, in terms of human rights. It's just that our expectations about perhaps how we should be doing right now are not being fulfilled. But anyway, my second question was, with regard to your findings about innovation, the question about innovation, getting those responses in the middle, there is a literature and survey research that says that when individuals don't know what to answer to any question, personality, political attitudes, anything, they choose that middle point because it's low effort, they don't know what to say, and those answers become meaningless, full of error. Do you give them an opportunity to elaborate on those questions? Yeah, because you might then find responses. Like if you say very innovative or not innovative, would you tell us why? Okay,
Yeah.
Perfect. And I guess that will be part of the next data analysis, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then I guess I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
All right. I think Mark was the next one.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, for this presentation. Very, very interesting. Although you are my office mate, I didn't know about this. We never commented the project. So
Surprise.
I have two questions. One question on what the literature calls, at least the literature in theory or in political philosophy calls the citizenship paradox, and the fact that these people that you mentioned, they fall into a trap or a paradox. The paradox that they claim rights, but they claim rights to a citizenship that they do not have. So they do not exist, basically. You mentioned that. But what you didn't mention is that municipalities might be involved into this situation of helping these people just because the other layers of government only deal with citizens. And since they are non-citizens by definition, I mean, morally, I consider them citizens, of course, but legally they are not citizens, then there is a paradox there, and the municipalities feel abandoned by the other layers of government. So I just wanted to know your opinion on that, and if you capture this feeling that I have the impression that exists among municipalities, that they are forced to help these people without having the resources. Then another thing that you didn't mention, and is like the elephant in the room when you talk to some civil servants working in small municipalities, is that the dynamic dimension of this help or of these policies. Many municipalities get people from other municipalities that they tell them that the other municipality will help them. And then they face a false situation because these people are not distributed among municipalities. And then regional governments or state government does not redistribute these people. Then there is a dynamic effect in which big municipalities they face this policy, but in a number of people or in a number of demands much higher than the one that belongs to their competencies. So is that true, or is that I heard this argument many times, and I was wondering if it's true. And thank you.
Thank you.
You already got. Do you have enough to answer? Or?
I can answer, and then well, Abel, please. Okay, so thank you so much for this first round of questions. And I mean, talking about crisis is always, contested. I'm aware of, that this is a term that, I mean, it depends, right? I mean, who you are speaking with. I mean, if you talk, I don't know, with, I don't know, to the far right, we are like on fire. I mean, we are like, if you talk with environmentalists, we are also like in a, I mean, the worst part of our history. If we talk with, I mean, it depends with whom you talk with. But actually, when we, when we think of transboundary crisis, there is a very important component that, of course, we take into account in history. I don't know, like different situations. I remember, I don't know in what year that was, this volcano in Indonesia in the, I don't know, 13th century, something like that, that covered almost the whole planet with CO2, and I mean the temperature dropped like briefly because of this. I mean, of course, this is huge. This is almost the Armageddon, no? But there is something that is quite different nowadays, and it's information and interdependence. We are we live in a very interdependent world. We live in a very, globalized world, and where, economic exchanges, human exchanges, everything. I mean, I can be in Tokyo in 15 hours, right? So that's the layer of complexity that perhaps, the crisis, when we think of them in the past, they didn't have. And also, we can get all this information in just one click, right? So this sense of urgency is very much prevalent every single day. That we are under threat. And that's why I put this political part of transboundary crisis. Because we cannot forget that, why receiving 2 million people coming from the Middle East was a refugee crisis, but receiving 1.5 million Ukrainians in Poland and across the EU was something that was manageable, right? So it's a political decision. And it's also how you frame this as a crisis or not. So the political part is very important. The interdependency that we live nowadays is super important to understand this sense of urgency of this new normalcy that crises entail nowadays. To the question of innovation, thank you so much for those comments, because actually I have to be honest, I've been struggling a lot to try to conceptualize what innovation is. And actually, I took inspiration from another paper that was recently published on the COVID-19. A colleague of mine that I was working with her in a previous European project, and actually she was also working with municipal officials in Germany, and she introduced this variable of innovation, and she defined innovation, in these terms of, doing things differently from what they used to be, right? Of course, we can debate if this is the right way to conceptualize it or not, but this is the way that, we put it forward in our analysis, because, the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is something undeniable, this was a triggering event. This is something that is very present in our minds. And these people, who had to live every single day with little resources, that had to, try to maneuver in a scenario where they didn't know what to do, where no government knew what to do. They have very present how they had to innovate or improvise in this context, and how this improvisation became something that became a routine afterwards. So, this issue of innovation is definitely something that is prevalent. And also, Veronica, on your question about the questionnaire, we everywhere, every time that we use, for instance, this term, we put a note what we understood as innovation, so they had in mind like what we were referring to do things differently in the COVID-19 from what you normally did. Actually, when we look at the crisis management literature, they talk about peace times and crisis times. This is how they differentiate. The processes are different when we are under peace times. And
yes. Did the respondents have an opportunity to explain?
Yes, they have boxes. Every 4 questions where they could elaborate, and actually we have qualitative data on that some of them, they took the time to actually elaborate on these answers. And some of them, they even asked me, if you can do something, talk to the government. And they even, they wrote that, one of them that I can recall. So yes, this is present. Mark, on your question on citizenship, super interesting. This is a topic that I really like. And I know that several of us, we are very aware in our field of research, especially working on the local level, about citizenship. Actually, I have a colleague of mine that she's, she finished her PhD here in our department, Gulce Özdemir. She talks about the invisibility paradox, that depending with which political actor or economic actor you're speaking with, precarious migrants become more or less visible, right? So, and of course, we have the legal citizenship, but understand. I'm on the same page as you. I believe in more normative terms, in a more expansive view of citizenship as rights and duties, right? And in this sense, municipalities have done a very strong. They have done a lot in not all of them, of course, but I mean, many of them have tried to recognize or make visible subjects of rights to every single inhabitant of their territory, notwithstanding their legal status. And actually, we see cities like Barcelona that has done a great job, at least on paper. Then we can debate, the practice, but on paper, it has done a great job in precisely framing, every single resident of the city as a citizen, right, as part of the city who is a subject of rights. When it comes to the effect that you were describing, actually, this is not related to this project. Some years ago, I had the chance to talk with a policy official in one municipality who was telling me, we are, drowning with the amount of people coming to our municipality because they know that we are offering housing, we're offering this or this and that. And actually, this happens with irregular migrants that they cross the southern borders, and they are dropped in certain municipalities in Spain because they know that they can get more resources. So this is, I haven't done systematic research on this, but I have anecdotal evidence on this, not only talking to him, who is very knowledgeable, but also other people who have also commented on the same issue. So this is what happens. Yes. So yes.
And David. Hi, Juan Carlos. Always a pleasure to listen to your presentation, and
thank you.
And thanks for all the insights. And I have three minor questions, comments. The first one, building on what my French colleagues said, is the notion of centrality that seems unsurprising, right? That they perceive that they are kind of the central sort of institution in this situation, especially because that may be the question was whether in this qualitative kind of data that you mentioned, that it's very cool that you have that in the questionnaire that you're collecting, whether that sense comes from a sort of legal sort of obligation, given that municipalities are kind of the main providers of certain social services, and even the context-dependent element that the COVID crisis had in terms of the provision of those services, or whether there is something else in terms of ideological commitment, also this conviction, so to speak, of we are the central ones because we are the ones closer to the population, whether there is something related to that. The same goes for the part of innovation. I know that they already mentioned that, whether this innovation that specific is something that is based on an efficiency-driven sort of perception innovation, like I can do more with what I have, or whether this kind of a creative-driven sort of idea of innovation, like given that this is something completely new, this new context situation, or in this case the pandemic, let's do something completely new. It's not something like just changing the ways in which we're operating, like creating a response that is entirely new, given the specificities of the situation of the crisis in particular, and whether you I'm sure that I'm asking you to speculate a little bit on whether you can perceive that this sort of innovations would take a different form if the crisis would be another one, like a refugee-driven crisis, or the crisis related to Ukraine, that would entail some sort of another perception of innovation. And the final question, coming is whether you have breaking down your at least the partial sort of responses or the sample that you have so far in terms of the region where they are. The size matters a lot in here as well, especially in terms of the constraints, and hence the the potential pressure for innovation, or even the ability for innovation that they may have, or the centrality with which they perceive themselves to have in that situation, the ideology of the municipalities. There is any emerging pattern that can tell us if there is some kind of variation that tells kind of a little bit of a richer story, which I'm sure it's part of the next steps that you will undertake or whatever. But in case you had something out of curiosity, then you can tell us. Thank you. Carlos.
Thank you, Abel.
Thank you. I only have one question, which is clarification, and then again ideas for innovation and centrality, which I see have attracted our attention. So the clarification is simply when you say precarious migrants, you mean undocumented migrants, or even migrants in a regular or situation, but in a precarious socio-economic or working condition, because it's, to me, completely different, and I don't know if you are considering both or only the undocumented ones. But this is straightforward answer. Second, I was thinking that some of the problems with your measure of centrality and innovation are related to the fact that you are capturing or measuring or perceptions about these two concepts. And obviously this is subjective, and it could very well be that they are innovating, but they are not aware of this, or they are innovating very little, but they are proud of what they are doing, and they are, showing off. So I don't know if you have tools to measure more objectively what has actually changed and what has been innovative in the way they are doing things, and about centrality, I don't know, but eventually. So maybe not for obviously the whole sample of municipalities, but for these very few that you will then focus in depth in the second part, maybe it would be good at some point to contrast objective and subjective measures of innovation, and because it's clearly two different things. Obviously, I don't have I don't know if you have the information or the tools, or if it's feasible to measure it objectively, or if these two concepts only make sense at the subjective level. But just in case.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you so much, Juan Carlos. I'll follow up exactly on that. So I wanted to ask that maybe it was like a disciplinary gap, and that's where my question comes from. But I was wondering how much your results are about like perceptual psychological associations among a sample of civil servants about different aspects of the crisis management and what they perceive as effective, because effectiveness also is a subjective measure in this case, right? And I was wondering how much that maps onto objective associations. And one idea I had, other than objective measures, which would be fantastic if they're possible, especially for effectiveness, if you could measure that by surveying, rather than the civil servants, the precarious migrants in these areas and seeing how effective the response was. So maybe you can counterbalance some of the bias that you would have in the sample of civil servants.
Thank you, Aya.
Thank you very much for this lovely presentation. And I have a small comment, also picking up on my other colleagues. And sorry, apologies already beforehand if you said that. And I missed that kind of information. Who do you talk to? Who is the civil servant? Who's representing the municipality? And how much can you trust the answer you're given? So just as an example, you asked in the department to provide someone here for an evaluation of the departmental innovativeness or coordination or cooperation, and probably you would get a lot of variance here. So I would be very much interested to hear more about it.
Thank you, Simone.
Okay. Thank you. I have one clarification and one question. The first clarification is why you use municipalities. It looked like you were talking that sometimes you were talking about cities, sometimes about municipalities, sometimes about local governments.
Yes.
And maybe my question is that you have focused on the role of cities, let's say municipalities with more than 20,000. But to me, it looks like in the solution, probably local governments of less than 20,000 may have a say. They are part of the solution. Why you are then? I am just curious why you use municipalities when you are referring to cities and what at this level. And my second question is, in my mind, you had like this model in which centrality, innovation leads to a better outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. And then you are only like interviewing officials of cities that have more powers. Would not be like for centrality, so probably they have. It would not be interesting to send a survey to municipalities of less inhabitants, so you can really see if you don't have the chance to be central, you don't have the chance to be innovative, if it changes the outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Answer the questions, and then we have David, and then we have one more hand. Yeah.
Yes.
We can go in order. David and Reggio. You will come back now. You already have it.
No?
He has already another question.
Yeah, I will, and then.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much all for your questions. This is, I mean, really helpful. I mean, this is making me think a lot about the focus of this paper. When it comes, I mean, I'm starting with you. When it comes to the centrality issue that you were mentioning, and this, I mean, basically, I mean, to what extent our cities or municipalities are ideologically driven, or is more of a legal competence? So, what we find here is that it's a mix. Why do I say this? So, of course, cities have, or municipalities, they have competences on these matters. They have to do something. But the direction that they take on doing something, this is something that is, in many occasions, is a political decision. I mean, I can deal with people living in the streets in general, or I can focus particularly on precarious migrants because I consider them as more vulnerable than the others, for instance, right? This is not the case, but just to give you an example. Or as something that I have encountered, and I mentioned in the presentation, I mean, municipalities, they are obliged to register everyone, empadronar everyone. And there are municipalities like Barcelona that they don't require an address, right? And you can register without an address because they want people who are precarious migrants, who are living in homelessness, to have a padrón. But there are other municipalities, like it can happen in Madrid, where you cannot register if you don't have an address. So this is the political part of the story, right? It's the decision that you make. I mean, there are the competences, and it's basically the idea is are you willing to do the bare minimum, or are you going, or do you want to be entrepreneurial and do beyond that bare minimum, right? And I think, actually, that's one of my future hypotheses, right? How the political leadership may affect, where these processes are. When looking at crisis, I mean, how much cities or municipalities do, depending on leadership. I've been just looking at the raw data. Actually, yesterday I was going through all the information that we have, and I was very particularly curious about governments, center-right governments or right-wing governments, and actually some of them, they had the self-perception of these issues is very high. I mean, we did a lot, we did great. Which to me was, surprising, because actually, as you know, throughout my career, I've been a qualitative researcher. I've done a lot of in-depth case studies, and in the small end that I have, that's not what I see. It's quite the opposite. So I was I'm curious to learn why this is the result. When it comes to the issue of innovation and efficiency, this is, also, point taken. This is something that is very relevant. And actually, I included in the questionnaire the question of efficiency because I also wanted, to have this measure of the outcome, right? Not only, that we have the process, which is decision-making and coordination, and you have the end result, which is how efficient the result is. And this was inspired by one policy official. I did a pilot study first. I sent the survey to colleagues working on local governance of migration, and also to policy officials that I'm acquainted with. And one of them told me, like, I mean, you're not asking about how efficient this measure is, because to me, this was not efficient at all. I mean, we didn't reach all the population that we wanted. I mean, these precarious migrants, some of them were so afraid that, I mean, they found so many obstacles. So ask about efficiency. So that's, I try to separate that, but I need, of course, to dissect all this data. When it comes to the question, now I move to, I think that the question on precarious migrants. I think that Clara asked the question. Yes. So when I mean the clarification, when I refer to precarious migrants, the precarious part is mainly located on the legal administrative status of that person. But the legal administrative status is, one of them is to be under an irregular administrative situation. This is undocumented, right? But other situation might be someone who is, as it happened in Lleida during the, this is a perfect example, it was on the news. In Lleida during the COVID-19 pandemic, you had a lot of temporary workers. They had permits for a short period of time. The COVID-19 hit, they were working in the agricultural fields. All of a sudden, they were homeless. They didn't have any place to stay. The municipality had to find ways to host these people, to accommodate these people, so they could pass the lockdown, right? So this is, I mean, it's irregular migrants, but it's a bit more, because I'm also considering, think of, for instance, people who was requesting asylum, and the decision came, which is very common in Spain, that international protection is not granted only in 5% of the total applications. So you're gonna go back to your country because, of course, I mean, you're being persecuted, so you stay. Of course, you are now under an irregular situation, but initially you were an asylum seeker, right? So this is, I mean, the clarification. When it comes about, I mean, the objective, subjective measures of innovation and centrality, I mean, this is, I've thought a lot about this, because I'm aware that, I mean, we're dealing here with perceptions. And perceptions, of course, I may perceive this in this manner, and, you know, depending on who tells you the movie, might tell you that it's better or worse, right? And I'm pretty much aware of this, and I need to find ways to better justify, I mean, this aspect. However, I must say that within the questionnaire, we have a repertoire of different actions that were implemented. We directly asked, like, could you tell us to this list of 20 actions, which ones you implemented, which ones were new, okay, compared to what you had before. And we also asked, like, I mean, the ones that were not new, were they created because of the previous, we call it refugee crisis, because it was easier for them, although I disagree with the term, but it's easier for I mean, policy officials to understand. So we have this information. So this is, you know, like this more objective measure, but we need to work on this, definitely. Thank you about the question on the users. I wish I could do it, but this is super, super difficult. I mean, maybe I could do like I don't know, like a focus group with precarious migrants, but I would need, of course, to find them myself. I mean, municipalities, they won't help me because this is confidential data. I mean, this is very sensitive data, so it's very hard. And also to convince these individuals to participate, usually what you do is that you go to leaders, to immigrant association leaders, and this is people who are highly politicized already, who the ones who participate in this focus, so there is also bias there. So, I mean, it's difficult, right? So, yeah, but this is, yeah, thank you for suggesting this. Simone, on the question on who do you trust, I mean, about the policy official, this is a super good question. I mean, what we did, and actually in my ethics review, what we said is like, well, we are not gonna send any personalized emails, we are not gonna we are gonna just send it like to a, I don't know, like to a general email and they will distribute it. But we know that in reality, this doesn't work this way. I mean, here is Eva, Juliana, they were like phoning municipality, hey, who is the expert on this, and that? And this way is how we found these people, tried to be super nice. Oh, please help us. Please, please, please help us. Give us your email. Even with that, they were not answering. So they had to call back again. Please, please. Okay. After the coffee, I do it. So, like these kind of things. It was. You don't have idea. The effort that these 91 responses have behind. It's incredible. We have been working on this since March. That's why we are super excited with finally having this agreement with the Federation of Municipalities. The trust issue. I hope that we are, addressing the right people. I think that we are addressing the right people. Also, I've been working on local governments of migration in Spain for over 12 years. So, I know more or less how the landscape looks like, so I think that I can trust. But of course I cannot say this on a paper. Oh, I trust this because of course, but this is, among us. About, Martí, the question on municipalities smaller than 20,000 people. If we get this agreement with the Federation, I would tell them, please send it to all your members, because, I think that they cover, thousands of municipalities all over Spain. I would be super happy if they do so. So I have this room for comparison. But so far, with our resources, we are just focusing on these 417 municipalities for the moment. I think that I cover. I don't know if.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, congratulations for the presentation and for the research. I think that this kind of research is needed to understand the municipalities and the work designing public policy. I agree with some comments, and I want to make some ideas that can improve the research. First of all, the perceptions. No? My first question is, you talk about policy officials, no? But in the municipalities, we can find a lot of categories of policy officials, because you can find professionals, civil servants that they don't depend of political election, and you can find policy officials that are related with political elections. For example, in Barcelona, you can find the manager, the gerente, that is an appointment, a political appointment. Because when I respond your survey, I'm not in the same place if I have a political mandatory appointment or not, because the political bias is different. No? I think that you can find in your survey these categories of political appointment or professional appointment, and find if there are differences related with this position. So it's one idea. And another idea, we are talking about perceptions, no? But I agree with Clara that we need hard indications, objective indications. And this brings us to case studies. I think that case studies are the way that you can identify indicators like a new budget related with this public policy, new human resources related with this public policy in the COVID context, no? New information systems. Is there any contingency plan related with this kind of citizens or immigrants? There are a lot of indicators that you can use to construct a case study and test if the perceptions are or not true. But it's a very difficult, it's another research, no? I think that this kind of case study research can be very helpful to test, no, the results of the first one. I think that you now have one photograph of the reality, and do you need to compare this perception photograph with another one know with this paper with the future papers. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. David.
All right.
One last question,
Yeah.
and then if we run out of time, people can approach Juan Carlos.
Thanks so much. I'll keep it very quick. I'll keep it to the question of centrality. First of all, in terms of definitions, is it clear to the respondents what centrality means? Do they think of centrality vis-a-vis the layers of government, or centrality more horizontally with regards to other municipalities or maybe other horizontal administrations? About how to measure objectively, one idea just occurred to me, is that you could ask them with which other administrations they have collaborated during the pandemic, and then do some sort of network analysis, trying to see which administrations came up most as those with whom the respondents have said that they have collaborated. This is what people do when they for example, do analysis of collaboration networks. That could give you some methodological tools of approaching the issue from an objective angle as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so David, thank you so much. I mean, this is, a very good point on the political policy officials. Actually, well, the survey is about, técnicos, no, técnicos municipales. But you're right. I mean, there are some that are appointed, some that are, there are civil servants, and other ones who are politically appointed. Unfortunately, we don't have that distinction in the questionnaire. We don't make that distinction. So, yeah, this is another layer that I need to think about how to, to address it. Because this is something that may come up as a potential critique. About objective indicators, yes, this is actually initially, the survey, I was thinking to do the survey and also to do focus groups, right? This was the original idea. I'm not sure anymore if I should do focus groups. Still in the questionnaire I put in the end, can we contact you for, further research or further questions? And many municipalities, I'm saying, 20, out of the 91 responses, 20-something, they said yes, of course, and they gave their personal email. So, this is something that if we want to triangulate the information, this is something that could be done. And case studies, yes, actually this is what we want to do, after the summer when we start doing the case studies, actually to find out about these issues. Of course, finding this new budget and all this is, a lot of work. This is time consuming, and I don't know if for a very large sample we have the human resources to do so, but for a smaller sample, for sure, this is something that we can do. Regarding centrality, yes, in the questionnaire we ask about vertical and horizontal dimension. We say, well, how central do you see and then you go your local government, and highly central, etc., right? And then we ask about civil society. We ask about national government, regional government, European Union. So they offer different degrees of centrality. From their perspective of the local government, we make clear in the question from the perspective of the local government. About potential ways of how to navigate this complex perceptions part. Yes, network analysis would be great. I have to be modest in this, and I'm not an expert on network analysis. Actually, this is the first time that I'm actually getting into a quantitative work led by myself, because this is first. I've worked collaboratively in many quantitative projects. Now my colleagues and friends, they brought me to their side, so now I'm willing to learn. But this is something that actually I need to consult, and I have a friend and colleague of mine that I didn't mention, Itzel Perez Duran. She's associate professor at the Autonomous University. She's an expert on surveys. She's an expert on this kind of research with policy officials, and actually she will be part of this paper. So she will help with this the challenge of actually, like analyzing the data. Yes. And again, thank you so much all for, wonderful comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.